Hey, you guys, happy Thursday. I'm so excited to be sharing with you tonight with our expert and fellow friend of Stand Up Survivor. I'm an expert in her own right. We are so excited to have you back, Katie. Welcome back.
Hey, everyone.
So Katie is joining us tonight. So we're going to give you a few minutes to jump in and get ready. Make sure you take some notes. We're just going to have a really transparent and honest chat this evening. When you jump in, let us know where you're tuning in from so we can say hi to you and know where everyone is coming in from. Katie is an author. She's a therapist, a psychotherapist. She is, what else? A social worker, a licensed clinical social worker.
I paint too. A cat mom.
A cat mom. And you have
I'm a writer for Psychology Today.
A writer for Psychology Today. You guys, you have an expert in front of you today. So I'm excited to bring this content to you. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to make sure that if you're watching the replay that you're getting content from the moment you tune in. So Katie, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Yay. So Katie has been with us several times. So if you want to learn more about her and some of the work that she does, the book that she wrote, and some of her expertise, please go back and check out our videos here on Facebook and our YouTube channel. So today we're going to be talking about mental health and domestic violence. As a survivor of domestic violence, our mental health is very, very important. And I asked Katie to come on and talk about it. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, Katie, right? And so there's so much stigma around mental health, but I think especially being a survivor of domestic violence, how important it is to care for our mental health. And so when you come in, let us know where you're tuning in from so we can say, hey. So knowing that this is Mental Health Awareness Month, what would you say to just start it off?
So Mental Health Awareness Month, and everyone always says to me, what does that mean? And for me, I always think of it just as like, just awareness. Awareness can mean anything. Like for some people, it's, a check that they need to kind of do, mental health scan for themselves. And some people, it's just the awareness that the mental health is a thing and just kind of bringing awareness to all the different topics that have to do with mental health.
That's good. I think, hey, Shar, I think it's so important, especially as survivors of domestic violence, that we have this conversation.
Yes.
I'll share from my own personal experiences. I always try to do is that as a survivor, I remember being in the relationship and just being in so much pain, right? Mm-hmm. And not knowing what to do with the pain or where to place the pain or how to process the pain, right? And then when you're in it, you don't have time to process the pain because you're in survival mode. Right.
And then when you leave, sometimes it continues. And I always tell people leaving is a process. It's not an event. And I'll probably say that quote another 5 times tonight because, when you leave, people think, okay, they left, it's done. They're fine. No, then you are left with the feelings. Your mental health is sometimes pretty bad at that time, or maybe you don't have support at that time. Maybe people have turned their back against you and yeah, all of you said many people feel suicidal, things like that, and just hopeless. Like, what do I do now?
And it's like, I remember even being in it and not wanting to live. I wanted to die. I remember thinking this pain is so significant. I could not have been created to endure this much pain. And it was so painful.
Yes.
I was even a mother. And so I thought, I'm not thinking these thoughts. And it's so important to be able to acknowledge that and recognize it and then do something about it.
Yes.
Especially as a survivor of domestic violence.
Yes, absolutely. It is just so important for survivors and for any survivor of trauma, but especially any kind of relationship trauma, domestic violence, like just being aware and knowing, what to do.
I think one of the hardest parts in domestic violence too is being gaslit. I remember, and I always tell this part of my story because it's like my ex-husband could have said the sky is green, and I'd have argued you down to the ground, Katie, that the sky was green, and you could not have told me any different. That is the type of trauma that you endure. That is the type of brainwashing that you endure. So when you come out of the relationship, it's hard for people to understand the significant connection and bond that you have with someone who has mistreated you so much.
Mm-hmm. And like being told for so long that that's not what's going on and being made to feel like you're crazy. And for a lot of survivors of domestic violence, for a lot of people, unfortunately, this isn't their first experience with it. A lot of people have had family trauma, or maybe they watched their parents, have a toxic relationship. And so a lot of people, it brings back those kind of feelings and they're like, oh no, this is repeating itself.
Yeah, here we go again. And then when you get out, and one of the comments just said, like, everybody expects you to be okay because you're out now. And that I feel like that is just such a loud and huge misconception because, like you said, leaving is not an event, it's a process. To even begin to recognize you're in an abusive relationship, then leave, and like all of this is happening in your mind. And people are like, well, you're good now, you're gone. Like that is the beginning of when things start to come up all over again.
Yeah. And then if you have any kind of post-separation abuse, then it all starts right then.
Yep.
And
All over
yeah,
again.
but then people are saying, but you're out, you should be good, you know? And so it's almost like this cognitive dissonance, which is a term that we use in mental health to mean like, you know, what we're thinking is going on versus, you know, what we believe. And sometimes those things can be conflicting.
Yeah, and it's so funny. Somebody said earlier today, and I just love this comment. I probably should highlight it somewhere. I don't know, something about, we were talking about post abuse,
Yes,
parental
post-traumatic.
abuse. So
The post-separation abuse.
Post-separation abuse with the children. And
Yes.
it's like, how come the judges think that all of a sudden, because you've left the relationship, that the abuser is no longer abusive? It's like it's unbelievable to think that everything should be okay.
And it's interesting because when I was doing research for my book, I found that only something like 25% of judges across the nation have any kind of a training on domestic violence.
Wow.
And I was like, wow,
That is
like
a
that was
crazy
one of
number.
the biggest things for me for my book. Wow.
That's a crazy number, Katie. And you think about the millions and millions of survivors
Yes.
of abuse and their children, and only 25% are trained.
And they see, yeah, and they see judges every day, and the judges aren't trained.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
it's
that's
just
really hard to relive your trauma all over again, you know?
just like,
So-
yeah,
so
like
let me
Lori
ask you a
just
couple
said.
questions. Oh yeah, Lori said that too. It does need to change.
Mhm.
So, okay, I have a couple questions for you that I'm going to go through, okay? So what
Okay.
role does mental health play in the life of a survivor of domestic violence, would you say?
So this one, I always tell people that it's different for each person, because for some people the mental health, you know, maybe it gets worse when they leave. For some people it gets better when they leave. For some people it's kind of an ongoing journey. It's kind of like if you have any kind of a medical concern, like if you have diabetes or if you have high blood pressure, it's something that it's not ever really going to go away, but it might be in remission, or it might be, you know, maybe you're going through a really good time because you have a lot of support, you're med compliant, and things are working really well for you. So as far as like what role it plays, it's definitely, it's something to really make sure that you have support when you leave, because there's a lot of things that will come up that you're not prepared for. Like Lori mentioned, being re-victimized in the court system, things like that. And I do want to mention right now, I know many of us, you know, have social media, obviously. You know, the trial that's going on right now is in all of our faces. You know, you can't escape from it. It's on the nightly news, it's on social media, it's on Instagram. Many of my clients are talking about it, and my family and friends are talking about it. And so, you know, take care of yourself, be mindful of the stuff that's going to come up and the triggers that are coming up from just seeing it or hearing about it. And
Yeah, that's
like
really good. I'm glad you said that, because oftentimes we can be re-traumatized or
Yes.
triggered by the things that we see in social media. And I always
Yes.
like to teach on boundaries. Like if you know that getting on social media is going to be a trigger, or it's like,
Yes.
this is the thing, and I know people may disagree with me and stuff, but I'm going to say it anyway, because I know you and I can kind of do this together. But like, I've seen stuff like people say, well, people aren't responsible for your triggers, right? And I kind of feel a certain, like, I feel it. So no one's going to walk on eggshells supposedly around you, but I feel like as the survivors, we need to set our own boundaries and protect ourselves. Like we can't expect people to protect us, right? That's kind of like my take on it.
No, and I absolutely understand. Like that's the thing, is like ultimately what we're dealing with in life, we're going to have triggers. And so the thing is, like, you're going to get on social media, you're going to turn on the nightly news, and then maybe they're broadcasting it on CNN, and you know, you avoided the trial all day, but now they're showing the part where Amber Heard is screaming into the TV, and whatever that does to you, for whatever you know, whoever you think is whatever's going on, that's fine. But no matter what, this is triggering for many people. It's triggering just to see that, and not only to see it, but to see the way people are talking about it.
And the memes and the TikToks and the stuff that is coming out. And it's so making fun to protect yourself. Protect yourself. Like,
so I agree with you.
You don't turn on the news. Like, don't scroll on social media. And it's really hard, right? But I think especially when we're in our healing process and our healing journey, that we take the steps that we need to protect ourselves. Right?
No,
we can't tell CNN, don't show that. That's ridiculous. That triggers me. But what I can do is not turn on CNN. I cannot participate in places or go in places that cause me to be triggered or think re-victimized even, right? And so I think taking ownership is a part of autonomy for survivors, and taking back the control over what you allow to get in your space, for lack of
and also knowing, okay, I'm gonna watch this trial, but it's going to make me feel some kind of way about it, and I'm going to have to process that. I'm going to have to take some extra self-care today because I know that I chose to watch the highlights of this trial this morning, and maybe do some meditation after it, whatever it is that you need to do to really get back in that mindset of, okay, now I got to go to work and file stuff after I just watched that.
I love that you said that if you are becoming triggered or something happens, find ways to cope. Someone in the comments said, they had something triggered them and they got on a call with their therapist immediately and was able to process it. And that's really important. Figuring out what it is that can help you move forward. So I think we can look at this next question two ways, right? Survivors, how do we neglect or overlook our own mental health? Like I will say for myself, my focus was not on me, it was on my children, and it was on surviving. And so it was completely neglected. And so how do you think that survivors really overlook their mental health when it comes to this process?
So with this, I always say resilience, being like overcoming things is both a blessing and a curse sometimes, because you get to the point where you're so resilient that you're just going and going and going. And so many survivors, people will say, well, when did you realize it was abusive? Or when did you realize you had to leave? Rarely do people be like, oh, it was June 2nd. No, it was gradual, because you're used to, like, you put one foot in front of the other and hours become days become weeks. And sometimes, unfortunately, those weeks become years. And so what happens is at the end of it, you're so used to being resilient that it's like, oh, wow, 2 years have gone by. So that is one way that they overlook it.
I look at it too. When you said resilience, I thought, wow, we think we're so strong. But the truth of the matter is we've been hurt. We've been attacked. We've been mistreated. And we're strong and we're resilient and we push through, but we have to deal with the pains and that happen to
the aftermath of that.
Yeah, exactly. I love what you said. Some of us feel like we couldn't set boundaries. Absolutely. But learning boundaries was something that I learned after, because I had zero boundaries. You can crisscross any of them, right?
Yeah.
And so it's learning what boundaries are, what your boundaries are. And it's like practicing. Like you practice how to set boundaries, But it's definitely emergent. It's definitely emerge. It's definitely something that as survivors, we have to learn how to do. When you pop in, just say, hey, let us know where you're tuning in from. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that, Vicki. Okay. So making sure that we don't neglect. I'm very visual. So I like to say, for example, you get bruised, you keep getting bruises and you just keep ignoring them. It doesn't mean you didn't get bruised. It doesn't mean that you don't have the injuries, right? And that's what happens, whether it's verbal abuse, physical abuse, psychological abuse. We can't just ignore that didn't happen. It's really important to take the time to care for our mental health.
Absolutely.
So what would you say are some of the most critical parts of mental health when it comes to caring for ourselves after abuse and then during abuse? So whichever one you want to tackle first.
So during, I would say that the most important things are just dealing with, the safety of it. And sometimes what happens is your safety is just, like I said, putting one foot in front of the other, trying to breathe, trying to get through the day. And so for many people, it's just, how can I protect my children? How can I protect myself? Like, I can't leave the house, that kind of thing. And then so, protecting yourself after would be almost when it's safe to do so, when it's safe to kind of let your guard down and really breathe. A lot of people don't realize this, but it actually is sometimes your mental health gets worse. Things like anxiety and depression will actually get worse when you do leave, because it's like your mind is finally able to take time to feel it. Because you were on overdrive for so long, just in survival mode.
And it's funny because if you think about all the pain that you endured in a relationship, it's so completely overwhelming that you can't allow yourself to feel it a lot of times, because then how can you function? So you perfectly what you just said is that when you get out of it, it's like a ton of bricks hit you, right?
Yeah.
On top of fear and loneliness and having to provide for the children, it's like all of a sudden it's like boom, and now all of these things on top of the pain that you already feel.
Because you're in survival mode for so long that it's just like, oh wow, I haven't, it's like when you haven't drank water all day, and at the end of the day you're like, I could drink 7 gallons. I didn't realize I was so thirsty.
And I think too, it's really important to give yourself grace, especially when you're coming out of the relationship, because even, in our transitional home, I always tell survivors, I'm like, we don't put any stress on you, especially in the beginning. Like we want you to just crash and rest and cry. If you don't get out of the bed for 3 days, we are not here to judge you for that. Because the fact of the matter is, it's totally normal to not be able to move even sometimes. Because I've had survivors who come in have slept for days.
Yes.
Just because they're just so exhausted from that fight and flight mechanism that they've
Mhm.
been living in for so long.
Mhm.
And so I like how you said, and I'm going to just kind of reiterate it. Understand that when you do get out, you may be bombarded with these different emotions and feelings.
Elevated mental health symptoms for sure, like exacerbated anxiety, depression. I see it actually both ways. I'll see some people get out and they sleep for 3 days, and I'll see some people get out and they don't sleep for 3 days.
Yeah,
Like I see it go either way,
yeah,
depending on what's going on.
yeah. I like to describe it how, of course, again, visual. Like, when you're putting your stuff on the register, right? And then it like backs up all of a sudden.
Yes.
It's like, oh my gosh, it's kind of like that. It's like, oh my goodness.
You guys stand there awkwardly holding the bananas, like I meant to do this.
There's nowhere to put it. Yeah. And it's like everything gets backed up in that moment, right? And you're still trying to process, oh my gosh, I'm not with the person that I've loved or have lived with for all this time. And oh my goodness, I have these responsibilities. Oh my goodness, there's a restraining order. So I always encourage people to just, if you can for a minute, give yourself some grace.
Yes.
Yeah, Heather said, feeling things that I was never able to feel before. So now it's debilitating to feel everything
at once.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah, and it's like it just hits you like a ton of bricks. So, so if you guys have questions for Katie, please go ahead and we can try to answer some in the comments. But what would you say about that? Not feeling before, but now feeling kind of debilitating, feeling everything all at once. What are some steps do you think that would be helpful in a situation like that?
So in times like that where it feels like you could just about to combust because everything is bottling up, I tell people the easiest thing to do is to sit down and write. I mean, because it's something you could do right now, May 19th at 8 p.m. You don't have to schedule an appointment. You could sit down, you could take a sticky note and write. You could take a napkin and write. And just write. And it doesn't matter the grammar. Don't worry about whether it's a comma or semicolon. Just write. No one's going to read it. You can rip it up. You can flush it. You can burn it. Write. And then start, getting into some kind of support, whether it's support group, whether you have a friend. Sometimes like what I call it is almost like you have like your sponsor, like your person who you call when you're like, oh, I think I'm going to call him back, or, I think I'm going to go see her, like call my sponsor, have that person who you're kind of accountable to, who can say, no, remember the sky is blue. We've already established this, and you're starting to think it's green again, and things like that.
I love that. So I'm not going to go away from that just yet because I love it so much. You're absolutely right. I feel like having someone that you can call, say, hey, I'm getting ready to go drive by. I'm going to call. I'm going to pull up their social media. I'm going to drive by the house. I'm not doing so well right now. They asked me if I wanted to come over and say, well, hey, and someone that
they just want to meet for coffee.
Yes. Someone to kind of calm you down and talk you off the ledge is important. I love that. It's really important. I've done it with survivors over and over again. I'm like,
me too.
You are doing this. You can do this. And the feelings do pass eventually. Are they?
They do.
No. But they're definitely
it's like a craving that will pass. That's why I call it a sponsor, because it's like, no, you don't pick up the cigarette, just call, don't pick up the drink.
I love that. And find that person, find that community, find that group, find that therapist, find that person. You could even text. And another thing, Lori agrees, she's about journaling. I remember all the time having all these feelings, and I've always written in journal. So I would write it, rip it up, throw it away. Because
rip it up. Like, don't be afraid to.
Yeah. Rip it up, because you're really getting those feelings out. That
get it out.
They matter,
And I always tell my clients this: no one is going to read it if you rip it up. And so what I mean by that is you can say anything. If you're like, I hate this, you can swear, you can curse. No one's going to see it. Rip it up, and it
gives you freedom to write. It gives you freedom to write freely. Oftentimes the survivors, we're people pleasers. We pick what we're going to say, how we're going to say it, when we're going to say it, if we can say it. And that writing.
Not going to make them mad.
It frees you to just write and get your feelings out. So we definitely encourage you to do that. Let me see. How do you think are the best ways to empower yourself to live without so much fear? I mean, that's a loaded question. How do you live without fear?
So that's the thing that I always tell people. So a lot of this stuff goes back to family of origin stuff. And I know that can sound victim blaming, and I don't mean it like that. And B, it can sound like, it's not really an answer to the question, but a lot of this stuff is very, if we have a fear of leaving someone, if we have a fear of how we're going to be viewed by the person, or how we're going to be viewed in society, or are they going to be mad at me? A lot of times, not always, but a lot of times that comes back to like, what happened? where did we learn that our voice wasn't as valued? Where did we learn that we can be treated like that or should be treated like that and we don't deserve better? That, that anxiety that comes from when you think about leaving or when they walk out the door, that anxiety a lot of times isn't about the person who just walked out the door. It's about the little child who maybe had someone else walk out a door. And so to answer your question, I know that's kind of a lot of like the spark.
That's really good. That's really good though, because if we acknowledge that it could stem from something else, it allows us
we're looking at that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you were going to answer their question. Sorry, I kind of.
I was just saying, like, I know that's kind of like the Spark Notes version of it, but a lot of it is like looking at, hey, what's going on deep inside me, and it doesn't happen overnight. It takes like a lot of self-reflection, discussing, spirituality, journaling, working with therapy, working with a therapist, working with a coach, work group, whatever, all the things. And just really looking into, where does this come from? That if you get that feeling of like you're not going to make it if they walk out the door, like that comes from somewhere, and really looking at that, because that fear is what keeps you going back and what keeps you opening the door when they come back.
Yeah, that's good. And the truth of the matter is you will survive without them.
Yes. And I know it doesn't seem like you will, but you will.
It doesn't feel like it. Oh, absolutely not. And they've already convinced you that you can't and you won't and you won't be able to. But, me and Katie are here to tell you it's a lie, right? So we just want to lie. Yeah,
but we understand, like, it does feel like that.
It feels like that. But if we told you that it's not true, hopefully it'll give you enough push to say, okay, I'm not going to answer the phone, or maybe they're actually right. Maybe Katie and Lisa did not lie and it's actually true. Someone said, where can I find a sponsor? So I would start with suggesting your local domestic violence agency, your local therapist,
support groups,
a support group.
Yeah. Like a friend who's been through something similar. That's like what a friend and I did. She had been through something similar, and we both were like, because you need someone where, like, when you tell the story, the person is like, oh, I get it. I understand. Because if you're telling the story and the person's like, huh, they did that? That doesn't make sense. You know right away if a person understands the situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that answer. Thank you. Art journaling is amazing relief. I love that. Okay. So abusers often make survivors think that they're crazy, right? That's a big one. Listen, let me tell you something. I don't even know how I made it out with like a sane mind. What would you say to a survivor who the abuser has them thinking like you're crazy? Look, you're just like your mom. You need to get on meds like your mom. Or look, don't forget your dad was this. What would you say to someone who doesn't even trust themselves anymore?
So I'm going to share with y'all something that like probably saved me. My therapist, when I was going through it, she still calls it the peanut gallery. And, for most of us, my generation and above, we know the peanut gallery. We know that was them sitting back there going, wah, 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 wah. Because that's what it is. It's like that voice that's, the person, what if someone really does think I'm like my mom? Or what if someone really does think I'm like my dad? Or what if people think this? Or what if that's what it all comes down to? And so when that fear of having them think that you're crazy, that's what it comes down to, is like, why am I really thinking, why do they have that much power over me and that much, weight in the conversation that I can even consider that, when we can get to the point where we view them as just some random small little person back here in the peanut gallery talking, and just like, okay, when you can get to that point, but it takes a while to get there. It takes a lot of self-empowerment, working through, like I said before, those triggers with, your family of origin, unfortunately, and, wherever that little child that learned, that they weren't valued, or that they were problematic, or that they were a burden or something. And because somewhere that you're hearing those messages and you're maybe believing that it's true.
Yeah, that's good. And you call it peanut gallery too, and I like to reference it as noise. Hi, Stacey.
Yeah, like the noise.
It's just noise, right?
The noise back here.
Yeah, and it's like, and it takes time to filter through the falsehood of what they've said to you and the truth of who you are. It can take years, but it can happen.
Yes.
Right? And I was talking to a survivor the other day, and I was like, how like the horses, they like put the blinders on, like,
yes,
like this.
That's perfect.
To like your focus is straight ahead, because there's going to be distractions everywhere. And so it's like, oh, well, look at that. It's like, no, I'm focused. I've got to heal. Like there's this, it's like this goal or this hope that there's something on the other side of this. Let me stay focused, right?
Yes. That's
Because
perfect.
if I can just stay focused on what I see in front of me, or maybe what I can't even imagine is in front of me, I just keep going. It's noise.
Yeah.
If it's not pushing me toward my goals, if it's not helping me heal, it's noise.
And you will get to a point where when they tell you you're crazy and they tell you need meds like your mom or whatever the thing is, you will eventually get to, it takes time, but you'll get to where they're just noise back here. It does take time though, because they have so much of a pull and there's so much of a bond there, you know, a trauma bond that you feel like, oh, well, maybe they're right. Or maybe that, you know, maybe these things really are true that I've always kind of thought about myself.
And I can remember like for years after, I can still hear my ex-husband's voice talking about me, something I did or didn't do, or the way that I looked or something. I was like, goodness, years later. And like you said, it's still there. But slowly but surely over time. I think that was probably like 6 years after I left. So it takes time. If you still hear it, don't dismiss the fact. Okay, we recognize that it's there, but we realize that it's just noise that's going to go through. So how can a survivor focus on their mental health? How can that be something that's intentional? Because we kind of, you know, if mental health is like the big rave now, but like if you broke your arm, you would go to the hospital, right? If you stumbled and hurt, if you broke something or hurt something, you would get checked or you would get it looked at. How do we prioritize our mental health?
So, and that's a really good example too, because if you break your arm, you know, years down the line, you could re-injure it. Or maybe you'll end up with arthritis later or whatever. So it's something that you need to really manage and really kind of have maintenance over. And mental health is the same thing. Mental health is the same thing where you need to really prioritize, you know, what it is that you need. And that's different for each person. You know, it's easy for me to get up here and give my plug of like, everyone should go to therapy and therapy's great. But you know, but for some people, a support group is their therapy. For some people, you know, their faith is their therapy. For some people, their journaling or their art or their travel is their therapy. And some of us, it's a number of those things. You know, I don't think I could give up one, you know, for the other. I think there's a lot of different things that people have that really work for them to help, you know, like slowing the mind down. You know, if you find your thoughts are everywhere, what can I do? For some people clean and that helps them. For me, that would make it worse.
Yeah, me too.
No, people like
I like how you gave all those different examples of things that could work, because oftentimes where it can be one track mind and go to therapy, but that's not for everyone.
Not for everyone.
Yeah, even culturally, I know some survivors who like therapy. In my culture, we don't do therapy. Right. And so what would you say to someone who is, hey, when you come in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if you have any questions for Katie, please just drop them in and we'll try to get to them. So say, for example, culturally relevant. If it's not culturally relevant, therapy is not something that we do. I don't feel comfortable sharing my feelings and thoughts with someone else, but I still want to heal.
Yeah, and I actually get a lot of inquiries, you know, from all around of people saying, hey, you know, I really need someone who either, you know, speaks or understands this language or understands this culture. And sometimes it's harder to find a therapist that really, you know, fits, you know, with the people who are looking for them. And I understand that. So sometimes it's kind of like, you know, the best you can get. Most therapists are white women, you know, and then second most often are white men. So I have a lot of people of color who are like, hey, I want a therapist who looks like me and identifies like me. There are fewer queer therapists. So that's another thing too, you know, that the people are looking for. But a lot of times it's people who are looking for someone who they feel validated with. They don't, you know, therapy can be scary. And it can be, in our culture in the United States, we really normalize it. You know, like I can get on here and talk about having a therapist and being a therapist, and it's normalized. I've traveled to countries where I don't share that I'm a therapist, you know, because it's just not something, it's stigmatized, it's shamed. Sometimes it's considered, you know, even like against their faith of the culture that I've traveled to and things like that. So, you know, there's a lot to be mindful of. And so I tell people sometimes reframing the language around it. Like if we think that it's therapy, then it feels like medical. And it feels like, okay, this thing I have to go and be like therapized. Or if we think of it as just, hey, I go and get my support once a week for 50 minutes.
I like that support. I like that support, you know.
I go get my support once a week or talk to someone on the phone.
Like for me, like I'm the kind of person who I'd call you and say, hey, Katie, I got this idea, this thing I'm working with. Can we talk it through? And for me, to me, it could be it's the same thing with therapy. I have a therapist who I could talk through and process some of the things that I'm feeling. They're not there to like tell you what to do, but really to just help you work through what your own feelings.
Yeah.
And interesting enough, like when I was going through domestic violence, I didn't see survivors that look like me. So it was really important for me to be culturally appropriate. So I let survivors that look like me know that, hey, you can survive and get out too. So that all of that is really important.
That's so important.
What is a trauma bond? I know this one is kind of little, but what is a trauma bond for?
I think I saw someone ask that. Okay. So a trauma bond is basically, it's a term that we use to define the bond that you have with the person who you feel traumatized from or by. And it can be a caregiver, it could be a parent, a family member. A lot of times it's a partner. And what it means is like, hey, I know this person was abusive towards me or traumatized me, but I feel that bond towards them, and that it's almost like you feel better when you're around them, for different reasons because of that bond that you have. And there's a lot of research and a lot of articles on that. It's very interesting. And it's one of the major things why many survivors have a hard time leaving, especially, if you love your partner. It's a very common thing.
Yeah. And to say, well, why didn't you just leave? Well, because I love them, right? Or because when we have a family together, there's children together, you still feel very connected to the person. Y'all, listen, I filed for divorce. I think I might have even been officially divorced, and I still wanted to save my marriage. So there's a lot of, and the truth of the matter is he hadn't changed, right? But again, I had to figure that out and learn that. So now I tell survivors like, no. But the truth of the matter is it makes sense that you're connected with this person, and even it seems unhealthy, and that's a form of a trauma bond. Okay, so you mentioned some of the different types of options that survivors have, right? Would you, when you talk as a therapist, when you talk to specifically to a survivor who has experienced domestic violence, do you find that something specifically helps them through processing their trauma?
So a lot of times when I talk to survivors, for some reason, just listening to them, and just being able to understand them, because a lot of times when you've survived abuse, especially if you've gone through, I saw Stacy, I think, mentioned narcissistic abuse, especially if you've gone through any kind of psychological abuse, anything like that, having someone who understands instead of giving you that look of this, because if you feel like you have to explain to the clinician, or if you feel like you have to explain to your therapist, because I thought Stacy said that the therapist didn't understand that form of abuse. I mean, if you don't understand it, you can almost, as the client, feel gaslighted yourself. Therapist isn't doing it maliciously; they just don't understand. It's like having a culture difference, it's experience difference. But being able to fully understand what it is that the client has gone through, and just listening and making them feel like, yeah, that I believe you, and I believe that happened, and I understand what you're saying, and I believe you. Like, that's why I keep saying that word believe. Like, clients, like survivors, need to be believed, and they need to feel believed.
Yeah, that's really big. Thank you for that. Anybody else have any questions? We had a couple questions come through. I'm going to ask one of them real quick. Can you walk through some grounding exercises maybe that can help survivors? Maybe if they're having an anxiety attack or having a triggering moment or something that can help ground them a little bit.
So I have one that is very simple. I give to all my clients, and I even use it myself whenever the anxiety starts kicking up. This is the most simple thing. Just orient yourself. And what I mean by orient is like bringing yourself to the present moment. Orient yourself to the date and time. I can sit here and I can give you a whole bunch of grounding exercises. We could talk about all kinds of different tools. But the best thing to do is if you find yourself getting in that thought loop and you're getting really anxious, what's today's date? Today's May 19th. What time is it? Okay, what's the weather like outside? And it's 4 seconds, it's 5 seconds. And yeah, your mind's going to go back to where you were. It's not perfect, but just for that 1 second, you have to think, what did I have for breakfast?
Yeah.
And for 1 second, it's like a grounding exercise.
Yeah, it brings you back.
I find that works better for people than like doing a full, display of a grounding exercise, like, having get out the mat and let's do some breathing exercise. I find like that, because you can do it while you're driving.
Thank you. That was a good one. Let's see. And the practice of walking away from what doesn't serve us. And so that's a good one. She asked just how do you learn how to walk away from things that no longer serve us? And I think I mean, I'll touch on that really quickly. To me, it's a lot of like boundary stuff. I think it's really important. There's a great book. I know you probably know. I think it's just called Boundaries. I think it's just
probably there's probably so many, yeah.
But like, I think setting boundaries and understanding as a survivor of domestic violence, coming out of the relationship, seeing what works for you and what doesn't work for you. Like, I remember, Katie, just having to learn myself all over again. What's my favorite color? What do I like? What do I not like? Do I like to wear this or do I not like to wear that? Because I was told everything. And if I did anything, it wasn't okay. So I literally had to learn myself all over again. And so I think it's important to understand what it is that you like and don't like, who you are. And that comes slowly, right? But I think that, and I remember, like, when I got out of it, it was like I had to do my best to not just be this hard, angry person. Right? Yeah. No one's ever going to do this to me again. I had to allow myself to be, tolerable, whatever word I'm looking for. You get it. But get to the point where you love yourself, like Stacey said, enough, and understand yourself and give yourself some grace. Because, Katie, if you cross my boundary, right? It's like you have to be, I'm not okay with you crossing my boundary. I'm taking ABC. I think we probably need to do a live on boundaries. But they're very important to having the strength from walking away from something that you do not like.
Yeah.
And you're the person who has to decide to do that. So what would you say, Katie?
So as far as walking away, I always bring back, and I know people don't want to hear about this, I bring it back to the abandonment stuff. Like, why is it hard to walk away? Now, okay, that's easier said than done. Why is it hard to walk away? Because you love them. But why is it so hard? Because there's a difference between it being hard to walk away and then having it be that feeling you get. And you all know what I mean, where it's like that feeling of like, no, my life can't go on. I'm going to shut down. Right. If they walk out, my life is over. I can't go to work tomorrow. I can't sleep. I can't eat. Like that comes from something else. So the power to walk away comes from, that inner child that, is scared to be left, and who's scared to be alone. Where does that come from?
And tapping into that inner child is so important to do in a safe environment with a therapist that understands that connection, right? It is really important. I was actually talking to a survivor today, and it's just recognizing, like, I stayed in this relationship. Like, the first thing is getting to safety and processing through that. Then it's like, wow, I stayed in this for 10 years. Lisa, that cannot happen again. How do you change so that you don't allow yourself? How do you heal so you don't allow yourself
to do that again?
That's taking that control. That's looking in the mirror, right? And that's choosing to walk away. So I got married in I got remarried in 2016, and I dated some people along the way. And if I saw a sign or I saw something that I didn't like, it was up to me to decide to walk away. Because if I did it, then then you get what you get. But it had to be a choice to choose to walk away. So Kimberly, yes, setting boundaries is really hard to do with people, especially if we're people pleasers and you don't want to disappoint people, right? But it is one of the most empowering things for you to do. And because oftentimes, Katie, if you could touch on this just for a second, being a people pleaser as a survivor of abuse, it's like all you did was do your best to please your abuser. So how do you change that or shift that once you've come out of the relationship?
So there's been a lot of research done recently, and I say recently, meaning like my lifetime, within the past 10, 20 years, we've had a lot more research on trauma. And we're finding that trauma responses aren't just fight or flight. There's actually a thing called fawn. And what that is like the people pleasing. And so we find that a lot of survivors of trauma do what's called the fawn response, which is where you're like, oh, okay, yes, I'll do that. I'll make sure to pick it up, and I'll make sure to go here and do that, because you don't want the person to get upset. And that is common, especially for people who have family of origin trauma as well. So that is definitely the people pleasing comes into play, and then you kind of lose sense of who you are.
So how do they build that strength back of not choosing to people please anymore? What steps can they take to get to that place?
So the first thing is learning what it is that you like, and developing the self-empowerment and the self-esteem and the self-awareness to realize, what is it? Who are you? Are you someone who likes tea or coffee? Are you someone who likes fish or steak? Or, do you like to go out at night or stay in? And like reestablishing those boundaries with yourself. Like, no, I need to stay in. I like to stay in, and that's okay. And like relearning who you are, and then practicing. And I always tell my clients, I'll give my clients homework of like little things. Like, for example, like let's say that you go to McDonald's and your order is wrong. If you're a fawn response person, if you're a people pleaser, you're probably, I'm going to eat it anyway. No, you paid $5.99 for that burger. Go back in, say that you wanted lettuce or whatever. Do it politely. Don't throw it at them or anything. I mean, like, do it politely. But and I give this homework to my clients to practice saying no in little ways. Practicing, no, I don't want the upscale and popcorn at the movies. No, thank you, or things like that. Because that is so hard for them to just say no, and then work on bigger things like declining a wedding invitation or declining a baby shower or things like that.
And that's so good. Like, it's so funny because at this point in my life, like, say if like you said, the burger example, my kids would be like, Mom, just eat the burger. I'm like, absolutely not. That is not what I ordered. They can take it back. Like, because I have always been, I just turned 40, a people pleaser. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll just eat it with the lettuce, or I'll just drink
I'm the same because, like, I feel bad.
Yeah, it's like, no, I'm not. It's like, and I think it's a teach, and I want to teach them, like, you pay for what you want, you get what you pay for. You do it with kindness and respect. That's important too. But I even we had a conference back in April, and we did a boundaries exercise, and one of the survivors shared with us how it was like a pen situation. Like, the girl had walked away with her pen, and she was like, I want my pen back, but like, how do I get this back? And it was just such a moment, like, we all clapped, but she said, she turned around and she said, can I have my pen back? And the woman gave her back her pen, and we were like, yeah, because we know how difficult it was for her to say, because she was like, it's my pen, and like, I really like the pen and I wanted the pen. And listen, for people who don't understand, it sounds really simple, but for survivors of abuse who have not had autonomy, it is huge.
So common
to save for what we want and ask for what we need. And the thing is,
for yourself.
It is. And I just want to encourage you, like, it's your right to get the things that you love, that you want, and that you need. You're not asking too much. Being in an abusive relationship, they'd have you thinking that asking for the basics, would be too much, and it's not. Katie, today I was talking to a survivor, and we were talking about how I remember praying. I was like, Lord, I just want to marry someone who's nice. Like, that's it.
Yes, like, just someone kind. Yes, I know. Kind. They don't need to be rich. They don't need a six-pack.
Exactly.
A compassionate person.
And imagine what I had to come out of to just want someone who's nice. I'm not even asking for a list,
No, I know. Yeah. And it really shows you.
It does. It
what
really
matters
does.
in a relationship.
And it's important for you to get and ask for what you need.
Because abuse survivors are always told that, like, they're too much, that they want too much, they ask for too much, you're a burden. Yeah.
Yeah, total lies. I think what Heather said was so good, so I'm going to touch on it really quickly before we get out of here. I say no, but then I turn around and apologizing for saying no.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Because you feel bad.
Yes. Can you please, like, give a nugget or something that can help? I mean, not just like all of us who do things like that.
So there's, like, the different stages. There's, like, the feeling bad, for asking for lettuce on your burger. And then there's the asking for it, but then feeling bad that you did that. It's like, there's different stages. Yeah. And so I always tell people, just ask yourself, like, where does that come from? What do I feel bad about? Do I think they're going to be mad at me? Do I feel like I'm asking for too much? Do I feel like I'm a burden? Do I feel needy? Do I feel like people are going to be talking about me or looking at me? Like, a lot of times it's again like that. Dun, dun, dun. What are people going to think? Yeah. Are people going to think that I'm a jerk for going up and asking for the pen back? And especially women, because we're really conditioned to, like, be more, like, oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
So, like, who's here saying, oh, she's mean for wanting the pen back? Who's that?
Yeah. And I think too, like, I read this thing one time, like, people really aren't thinking about you. We are so worried about what people are thinking about, and they're not even thinking about us, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think sometimes we overthink things and overstress about things that don't need to be. Stacey just said,
for sure.
Don't apologize. You are deserving. I love that. Absolutely correct. So I want to just share really quickly before we go about making sure that you focus and prioritize yourself. As survivors, we have come from situations where we only prioritize the abuser, right? That was our priority. And then the children and maybe ourselves, if we were able to be included in that. Prioritizing self-care and your mental health is really important. So whether that's journaling or going for a walk, going by the water, seeing a therapist, going to church or your mosque or wherever your faith community is, joining a support group, sharing your story, allow yourself to really focus on caring for yourself, because that's really important. And because you're worth it, you're deserving of it.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say, Katie?
And I definitely want my parting words for you all is to own your truth. I know right now with what's going on in the media, there's a lot of shaming all around for people who come forward for abuse or for, for all the different reasons that come with that, whether it's society, whether it's the law, and all the things that come with being someone who speaks out for or against this type of thing. And so there's a lot of shame in that right now. So, own your truth, whatever your truth is, and be, and like kind of do some self-validation. Like, yes, this happened to me. I'm going to work on decreasing the gaslighting that I do to myself.
Ooh, that was good. That's a whole topic in itself. I love that. Yeah, I love that. That's good. And remembering that you are deserving. It's your story. It's your voice. And you have a right, unless you have a legal issue, you have a right to use your voice. And it's important to do so. Own your truth. I always say, what happened to you, stand in your truth, period. And I always, people ask, well, how do you do this organization? Wouldn't your ex-husband say something? And I always say this, and I've told him, the moment I lie, stop me. But until then, leave me alone, because this is my story, my truth, the pain that I endured. And so if my voice is going to help free somebody else, I want to do that. I had one question that I did not answer, Katie. It's the last question. I feel triggered by interactions with my abuser.
Yes.
And feel like it sets me back on my healing journey. What can I do?
So you all, the first thing I'm going to say is it's imperative that you decrease common links. Now, I know it's easier said than done if you have children or family or shared assets, things like that. So if you do use things like, My Family Wizard, there's, I think, one called Two Families or something like that. I have a set of techniques that I've come up that I use with clients. When you have to communicate, if you do not have to communicate, like if you don't have children together, go no contact, gray rock. I mean, I know you all heard those terms, like no contact at all. Gray rock is be as boring as you can be. And decrease common links. You don't need to go to the same dentist anymore. You don't need to have, that second cousin that you met at the bar that day that you all went out for like yoga, whatever. You don't need them on your Facebook. The people you met on a cruise, delete them off your Facebook. Like, you don't need their second, aunt on your Facebook. Like, decrease all common links, because you're going to see them tagged, out at a sushi party or whatever, and you're going to be re-traumatized and re-triggered from that. You don't need to see it. And so I tell people, block them, and block them for you. Like, because we know that social media is never private. We know they're going to see everything that you say and do. Just assume that they will. Block them for you, because you don't want to see them tagged in anything. You don't want to see them popping up on anything. Just block them for your own peace of mind.
I love that. You block them for you. This is not about them. This is about you. No,
block them on everything. On PayPal, block them on Venmo, like block them on Skype, stuff that you don't think about. And then you log onto Venmo and you're like, why are they sending this person $50 for tacos? Block them on Venmo.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. That's a really good one. I've had survivors say they block them on everything, and then I think they message them on Cash App or something super weird.
Block them on everything.
Block them. And I understand if you have children, we know that gets a little bit more complicated, but you do have a method. Oh my gosh, I didn't plan to get there, but you do have is it a pop method? No. You have a method that you use.
My NEB techniques?
Yes.
So I have a set of techniques that I use with clients. It's called NEB. It's kind of like the person's name, NEB, N-E-B. And it's necessary, emotionless, and brief. So I always I rehearse with survivors, and I rehearse with them every day. And I say, is this conversation necessary? If they're messaging you to say that they had, they left their sweater, this conversation is not necessary. If they're messaging you about, okay, we need to pick up little Johnny a little earlier today, that is necessary conversation. Emotionless. Don't have any emotion. Almost act like you're responding to the CEO of your company. Assume that any and all legal counsel will be reading these. So emotionless, and then brief. Yes, I'll see you at 1. That's it.
Sounds so powerful. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it really is powerful, because as survivors, we're so used to oversharing. Oh, but I have to go to my grandma's house. Yeah, we're always giving more information than necessary. Be necessary, emotionless, and brief. Understand that they have lost the ability to get emotion from you.
Because they're going to pull you back in.
Absolutely.
They're gonna suck you back into that triangle and the drama, and like they're gonna get you mad, and then because then they know, okay, well, all right, you know, she still cares about me. They still care about me because I can still get them mad.
Yeah. Okay. So Heather, I have a confession, right? Okay. So I understand what that means completely. She said that she kind of wants to know what he's up to. Like, what is he doing? Is life better? And listen, it doesn't matter, right?
And honestly,
Because,
it always looks better on social media because
everyone's
I
life
mean,
looks better on social media.
we always look better on social media.
And their goal would be for you to think that their life is better on social media.
Yes.
When in fact, I'm sure that it's not. But again, I always remind, like, I don't think of, because I know what life was like with you.
Yes. That's why I'm like,
yeah. So I'm like, you know what? You didn't change, right? I'm just telling y'all, they didn't change. No matter if they're remarried and they're looking all smiley. So just keep in mind, I remember what they were like.
Yes.
And so this is the thing. It feeds into that part of you that is not healthy. Following them, seeing what they're doing, it feeds a part of you that does not move you toward healing.
That's true. Right? That's very true.
So really just try to focus on, don't worry about what they're doing. It doesn't matter. Because even
it does hold you back.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, oh, well, they weren't like that with me. Trust me. They probably were in the beginning. Don't worry about it. So
it does hold you back, and it's also something, it also fuels that addictive mindset. It's almost like when you eat sugar and then you want to eat it again and then you want to eat it again. So if you look at their social media, you'll want to do it again the next day. You want to do it again the next day. So I always tell people, wait, 30 days until you can look at their social media, and not even be affected like it's, a random third-party person. Don't look at it until you're completely neutral.
Yeah, and it's pretty empowering for you too, right? And then again, your focus was so on them before. Like I always tell survivors, hey, put that focus into you. Mm-hmm. Put that focus into your children, and you'll be able to redirect so much of that energy, because 99% of our energy went to pleasing the abuser, walking on that eggshell, making sure we were compliant. Now turn our energy around and put it into you and see what happens. The truth is, I remember there was a point where I would reread like his messages, and he was cussing me out and disrespectful, but it fed a part of me that was familiar, not healthy, but familiar, until I realized that it was like a form of self-torture, right?
Yeah.
And so I would encourage you, I don't really need to know. What I'm going to do in my life is I'm just going to be happy, I'm going to heal, and I'm going to thrive, right?
Yes.
So yeah, that's what we do.
Put it inward. Whenever you feel like, okay, I'm just going to check their social media, what can you do for you right then? Get up and make a cup of hot coffee. Yeah. Make some tea. Do something for you right then.
Yeah, kind of focus. I remember my ex-husband used to be like, I would always leave the kitchen cabinets open. So
I do that too.
Yeah, and it annoyed the crap. And it was like, you look at you, y'all. And I was like, I remember when I got my first place, all the cabinet doors were open. And guess what? I left them open.
I left them
wide open. And it was those moments where I would just sit back and be like, with the cabinet doors open, because it was mine. Yeah, like, And I'm telling you, it sounds really simple, but I'm telling you, these are these empowering moments where you're like, oh, this is,
Mm-hmm.
So anybody have any other questions before we free psychotherapist Katie Lynn Gillis? Listen, you can find her on her website there at the bottom, Katie Lynn Gillis, lcsw.com. She's also written a book. She has a website. Go ahead and check her out. She's amazing. What state are you in? Because I think you only practice in your state, right?
I'm in New Orleans, but I mean, I do coaching nationwide or worldwide. I do coaching, and then I do coaching for survivors of relationship trauma, and then I'm a psychotherapist. Of course, I live in New Orleans. It's way too hot here, but yes, I live here.
Well, I feel like that about Florida right now. But I'm a super big fan of Katie. I totally trust her. I feel like and you're writing for Psychology Today. Is it Psychology Today?
I have a blog for Psychology Today. Yep.
So check it out. Yep. She's amazing. She has so much expertise to offer you, so much wisdom. All right. If no one has any other questions, we are going to say thank you so much for joining us. We care about you. We want you to focus on and care for your mental health. And I always tell survivors, like, you get well, right? You let your children get well, and you start to heal and transform your whole life, because you can control that. So see ya. Bye, guys.